open source goodness. We've got Jim Jagielski. I've had two people pronounce. One said Jagielski and one said Jagielski. Do you have a preference for that? It is Jagielski. Curse that Lonnie Emerd for setting me wrong on that. Good guys. Anyway, he seems to believe that stuff that we've learned around an open source we can use in places other parts of our lives other than IT. Come on along, Jim, and let everyone applaud as you come to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Jim Jagielski. And you are wired and should be ready to go.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Good morning, everyone. I am Jim Jagielski. If we could hit the, there we go, thank you very much. First of all, it's pretty typical that the second day of open source conferences, the morning keynote is kind of like sparsely attended simply because of the big events that go on the night before. So I'm really pleased and surprised that there are as many people here as there are. So thank you for attending. I'd also like to take a quick time to thank Todd and everyone else for organizing Posscon. You know, I've spoken, I've attended a number of conferences, spoken in a number of conferences, even organized a few. And without a doubt, Posscon, it has to be one of the most professionally run and welcomed conferences. It's been my pleasure to attend and speak at. So, Todd and everyone, thank you very much. Okay, a little bit of what we're going to talk about today is this whole thing about open source, and specifically how Apache, the ASF, views open source. And we'll see inside here, there's a couple techniques, some methodologies that are successful inside of open source, certainly successful inside of Apache, but could also be very, very successful in other endeavors. Last night, we actually had a BOF, a Birds of the Feather talk, about different ways of creating open source communities. And so this provides a nice introduction on how the ASF does that. Okay, a little bit about myself. Just ignore all the titles. The main thing I want you to come away with is that I really consider myself, first and foremost, a developer, a hacker, a coder, an open source geek. So I'm coming at that with that frame of mind, that frame of reference. Now, the ASF is this formal legal entity called the Apache Software Foundation. And before that, there was this ragtag group of people called the Apache Group, and we were the guys who were actually developing and coding the Apache web server until finally in 1999 we decided it's time to get our act together and make this a legal construct. And the reason why is kind of twofold. First of all, Apache at that time was becoming very, very successful. A lot of people were using it. Well, at the time, there was no really, except for the license, no legal protection for us, and we all enjoyed our houses and the roofs over our heads, and we really didn't want to have anything happen that would possibly take that away. We didn't want to get sued, frankly. And secondly, there was a very large company called IBM who wanted to be able to embed the Apache web server inside of their WebSphere environment. And of course, when they wanted to do that, they wanted to make sure it was okay with some sort of legal entity. And at the time, there wasn't a legal entity. So in 1999, with the help of IBM, we actually did create the Apache Software Foundation, which is a Delaware-based foundation. It's a 501c3, so it's a public charity. It's volunteer-run, volunteer-organized. It's very, very important to know. No one who does anything with the ASF gets paid by the ASF for any of the stuff they do. It's either pure volunteer work, it's either paid for by their employees, paid for by themselves because their businesses revolve around it, but the ASF does not control or pay for any of the stuff that's going on in there. We actually have 2 sysadmins on staff, and we just hired an executive assistant to help with purely administrative stuff, but that's it. So developers and the board members and everything like that, totally volunteer-based organization. As you would expect, we're virtual, we're worldwide. So for us, being able to do that effectively, effective collaboration is very, very important to us. And the mission of the ASF is pretty simple. It's basically to provide a sort of like a legal umbrella for a bunch of really, really good open source projects and communities to grow, thrive, and flourish. Now we're going to look at a little bit of the legal aspects of the ASF because it's something that's going to become important later on when we talk about how the ASF views open source. As I said before, it's a member-based corporation. Only individuals can join as compared to other open source entities out there. There's no way, for example, a Microsoft can join or an IBM can join. Certainly they can become sponsors of the ASF, and we very, very welcome the contributions and the sponsorships. But there's no real a corporate control or corporate management or corporate influence associated with any of the ASF projects out there. When people are developing code within the ASF, they have this idea that they're wearing their ASF hat. They're wearing their hat associated with the project they're working on. They're working on as an individual. And so all the merit and all the work they do is recognized as coming from that individual and not from the company or so they may be on. The big thing that the members can do within the ASF is basically elect the board. It's a 9-member seat. And the board really doesn't have a lot of control or anything over that at all. In fact, what you'll see is we sort of like have this org chart. On the one hand, we have the administrative side, which is the legal construct you need because you are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So you need to have members and officers and board members to get done that administrative, legal kind of stuff you need to make the IRS happy. On the other hand, is how we manage all the open source projects out there. And you can see there's a variety of different classifications or hierarchy among those the particular individuals. We do consider everyone who uses any of the ASF projects that we have as members of that community. Then we have people who submit patches and bugs, and then finally contributors. These are people who submit enough patches and bugs that they do so recurrently, a lot. So they're actually actively contributing to a project that's very, very important to them. Then there comes a point in time when we actually give them the keys to the code, the commit privileges. This allows them to physically go in and change the official source code of the project itself. And finally, at the very top, there is this construct called PMC membership. And these are the members of the project, anywhere between 7 to 30, 40 people or so, who actually have the day-to-day management of the project. They're the ones who are responsible for adding in new members, adding in new contributors and committers, figuring out the direction that the source code needs to make. Now, hopefully you can see that line between the two. There is no leakage from the administrative side over to the development side. The board, for example, can't say to Hadoop, you need this feature, or you need to add this member because somebody just gave us a new sponsorship. There's absolutely no control. So the administrative side has no influence on the community side. The community itself is very, very self-contained, very, very self-controlled. Now, one of the problems when you look at a stack like this is that there is this entity within each PMC. PMC stands for Project Management Committee, and it's basically, as I said, those members of the project who have the ultimate authority on the control. And as I said before, that's a large group of people, not just 1 or 2 people. It's a large group of people. Because of the oversight conditions that we need as a foundation, the board tasks one of those people as a PMC chair, and their basic responsibility is every quarter reporting to the board and saying, how many members they've committed, how much source they've released and stuff like that. Just simple administrative stuff. They're the eyes and ears of the board, so we can make sure that we're doing the kind of oversight we need to do. The problem is, and especially with some reports and stuff out there, if someone is a PMC chair, they're tagged as the core developer or the lead developer or the main guy behind Hadoop or Harmony or something like that. And that is certainly not the case at all. Within the ASF and within the community, there is no such idea of that, of a key or core developer. He or she is just someone who has the task, as I said, to reporting to the board. So some of the things we need to do, and I won't go into a lot of this, but basically the idea is to create a foundation and a means to have these communities grow and thrive and flourish out there. Now this is like, if you think of typical mission statements that companies and organizations have, this is the long-winded version of what we try to do. But really, when you get down to it, we can distill it down to 2 key ideas. First of all, community-created code. It used to be called community overcode, but that kind of like gives the wrong impression. But the idea behind it is that the community is as important, if not more important at times, than the actual code you're producing. And we'll see why that makes sense. And the second thing is we have to produce really, really kick-ass code. Okay. For people who are looking about open source and stuff like that, some people may think, why open source? Why do you have these people who are so involved in putting out their time and effort and talent to do open source? And some of the reasons here is that, for people, they have access to the source code, avoiding vendor lock-in. These are all mom and apple pie kind of statements. I will go into a lot of, why open source is successful now. I think what's important is what draws people, what draws volunteers and contributors into open source. And without, I guess every developer out there has at least a large subset of these, if not all of them. For example, having a real impact and direction in IT, actually making a change and influence in how stuff is going on. The personal satisfaction of knowing that a piece of code that you wrote is, hosting, 70% of the websites out there, or is being used by NASA to help, correlate data, that it needs to worry about and stuff like that. There is a quick sense of accomplishment as well, quick turnaround time. Engineers, and coders and developers are, I think at least, artistic by nature. They don't like being stoic or stagnant. So providing an open source ability for them to very quickly add code, create, get it out there, get immediate feedback is very, very important to them. It really provides a personal satisfaction. Sense of membership in the community, again, is very, very important. I think it's even more important in the ASF than maybe in other organizations. And developers, hackers love to tinker. I mean, by definition, that's what a hacker is. And so this provides a really huge opportunity to do that, but also do it in a way which is fun, constructive. You learn, you meet great people, and you have great opportunities to do kind of fun stuff. Now, some of the FUD associated with open source, and we won't spend a lot of time on this because it's obviously all been debunked, but you have to talk about it anyway. No quality or quality control. Well, obviously, we know that's not the case. I mean, if open source was a mistake, we would have learned about it long before now. There's certainly enough evidence to prove that that's not the case. There's another, meaning that, it prevents or slows development, which, of course, is not the case away. Another thing, because it's called free software, to some people, you have to give it away. That free speech, free beer, you always have to make that analogy, to clarify what you mean by free. And of course, you don't have to give it away for free. And the other, FUD is that there's no real innovation. And I think, of course, if you look at the type of code bases that are being developed nowadays, all the real innovation is being done within open source communities out there. So at the very, very core, what's the core value of what an open source community or project is? Well, really, there's only one thing that you really need to have to be called open source, and that is your software has to be released under an open source license, an OSI, excuse me, an OSI approved license out there, and there are numerous amounts of open source licenses. In fact, we need to whittle those down, quite a bit, and hopefully we'll be able to start doing that this year.